Good morning, Mike. How you doing? Happy Monday.
Good. Good morning, Steve. I'm well. How are you? How was your
Doing good.
weekend?
Doing good. Weekend was okay. Okay. I after all my optimism last week, I got a little poorly over the weekend, but thankfully it
Oh,
was things are okay. I feel better this morning, but yeah. How was
did you
your
say
weekend?
pearly?
No,
Pearly over the weekend?
poorly. Poorly. It's an
Oh,
English expression.
poorly.
Poorly, yes. Thanks for
That's
translating.
great.
Uh,
That's great. Well, I was going to say I'm happy to serve as a role reversal today and be the one that brings you back to a level playing field of, Steve, we can only control what we can control. I
that's right.
revisited last Thursday and Friday's live stream, and what a ride that was.
Yeah.
Emotional roller coaster is the best way to describe it. And we help each other get through each day. So
Yeah. No, we should.
I really learned a lot, and I know we talked about a lot of interesting things. I hope we pick up on that. But how was your weekend at first? You spent a lot of time working on open source workplace and interviewing people and doing the stuff you do on the weekends.
No,
That's what
I
you find
did.
fun, right?
It is what I call fun. You're absolutely right. But in essence, I didn't actually.
Oh, took a break, took some time.
Oh, we're
What
getting
are you
some.
seeing?
So I'm seeing multiple things come up as we try out this new software. So it's taking a little bit of getting used to. But anyway, but no, I actually got some exercise. The weather here on Saturday was good, so I was able to go out and enjoy that. But what about you, man? Mother's Day yesterday. Were you able to spend
Oh
time
yeah,
or share time with your mother?
great day. Great
Yeah.
day. The weather forecast was terrible. It was going to be cold and blustery, and turned out to be sunny and perfect weather for sitting outside and keeping that physical distance while we got together with even my parents and my sister and my children. And it was really great. My wife had a great day. Really got a chance to celebrate moms. So it was really nice. And if we could do it more often, if we get to this spring and summer season where we can get together more often, it'll take some of that gloom and doom over that hangs over so many of us, and especially the most vulnerable among us, like my parents, to be able to get them out of the house and sit in the driveway and feel comfortable and share. Even though we couldn't hug, I did a little funny thing. Have you ever seen the movie Ghost with Patrick
Yes.
Swayze and Demi Moore?
Yes. Yes.
Where at the very end, Whoopi Goldberg kind of, has the role of taking on Patrick Swayze's spirit so she could hug Demi Moore one more time. So he could hug Demi Moore one more time. So that was my little joke. I told my parents to get together, close their eyes, imagine they're hugging me, and I played the Righteous Brothers. Oh, my love, that whole Unchained Melody song. So it was kind of
That's
corny but
so
funny
cute, man. That's so
and
cute.
a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. 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 Good.
How about you? Did you talk to the folks, the family back in the UK?
Well, it's interesting. So the UK Mother's Day is a different time of year. So they celebrate
Oh,
it in March. So and yesterday I was poorly, man. Honestly, I was bad. So I didn't, and part of it was I didn't want to worry or concern the family when they see me like that. I just knew it was just a temporary thing. I wasn't concerned, but you never know how they would take it.
yeah,
So
that's
I'll
true.
chat to them. I'll chat to them today. I did speak to my brother, but I didn't. I didn't wish my mother a happy Mother's Day yesterday. I'd done it earlier in the year in March, whenever
Okay.
it's celebrated there. Yeah,
Different cultures, different
different cultures, man.
times of
It's
year,
it's
different
interesting.
holidays.
So Mother's Day is different, but Father's Day is the same. I'm not too sure how that turned out to be, but there you go.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Well, what was your reflection of our time last week? And have you labeled this particular Monday,
I
May
haven't
11th
actually. I haven't. I haven't
broadcast
labeled it
yet?
because yeah, I didn't know where we were going to go with this. We don't have a script, we don't have a plan. We just really just
No, no.
let the news and let what's the talk of the industry take us different places. But I did watch back, like yourself, Thursday, Fridays, and sort of yeah, it was kind of interesting, right? It was kind of interesting in a sense of the topics, concerns on data, concerns on privacy, concerns on, happiness, how to control our
Yeah.
mindsets, how do we take stock of where we are today and play that forward in what we believe the future is going to be. And then from there, just really letting that fermentate in my head, and I really didn't come to too many conclusions. But what sort of resonated with you as you watched it back?
Well, I think I'm trying to get my head around this new phase we're heading into. this new reality, the new constant. Whereas in the first several weeks of quarantine and our pandemic life, our quarantine life, whatever you want to call it, it seemed like things were going mile a minute. News was changing, the information coming in. We were just we didn't know anything. We didn't know what we didn't know was the tagline. And in those early weeks, it seemed like days would go by and they would drag on forever. And it seemed like a week was a month, and every couple of weeks our shift would be changing on what we could talk about, whether it was the work from home strategy at first, or then the quarantine life getting to us and the well-being issues around that and mental well-being. And then we started talking about the anticipation of the return to workplace and return to the office and the strategies, and all the webinars were coming out and all these reports and articles around what's it going to look like when we go back. Well, I think we're about to enter a new phase if we haven't entered it already. And for me, things are starting to speed up a little bit because of the routine. And maybe it's because of the amount of news media I'm consuming is less. So I'm getting back into more of an understanding of, this is my life now. This is what I'm going to be doing for a while. Because whether the office at my company opens next week, which now it was going to be this week, I think they pushed it to next week in Texas because the state regulations and so forth, and regionally and just geographically and culturally and different needs of different organizations, the offices are going to open at different paces. But we're into this new phase of, we will begin to reopen the economy, and it's already happening in certain parts of this country and around the world. And it's not going to be back to normal for a very long time. What we used to, the pre-pandemic normal. This is the new normal. I think I've come to the grips with that. And that's where I'll start. I mean, do you feel we're in that place where at least many of us are accepting of the fact that this is not going to be planning for a post-pandemic world or a planning of getting back to some old reality? This is living with COVID-19, and we need to just kind of start preparing, or just start doing it, just living with COVID as opposed to getting to the other side of COVID. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I think we go back to, we spoke about Andrew Mawson's interview that we did with Open Source Workplace, where he talked about, zero-based property approach. So in other words, we have to, get to the point that you just articulated. We have to get to the point where this is zero-based. From here, how do we then move forward and how do we do it? But you have to reconcile that in your own head. And I think sooner people get to the point that you appear to have got to, I think the easier it is then to sort of, okay, this is ground zero. How do we move forward from here? What does here look like? What does the future look like? When you consider what you do, the role that you do for your organization, what does that role now need to be today, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months from now? And then how can you leverage or improve your skill set to allow you to be able to deliver that? And I think it's a really important point to get to, and then to focus on that. So I'd be really curious to see if you've got there already, or if you haven't, it's fine. It'll be good to hear and see where you think this is going to go, because a lot of your time is, yes, to the podcast, you have the live stream, and basically bringing, viewers to a platform to educate. And you often do that through appearing at conferences and going to conferences. And so how do you think and how do you evaluate what that will look like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now? I don't know if you got there yet, did you?
Well, again, I'm trying not to look too far down the road and try to figure those things out, because that's when I do get upset and I get anxious and the fear creeps in, those farther, wondering about how things are going to look, the things we cannot control, and we have to let those play out. But I do know what I can control today, and I know I can do this week. And in fact, I think that's what each of us has to start to accept, is that what I can control and what you can control may be two different things, and what our roles are two different things. And whether I'm going to be comfortable going back out into public and start engaging with restaurants and other things personally in my personal life is a question for me. It's a different question for you and everybody watching this. So also going back into an office, I never was in an office before. I was always a remote worker. So, I love talking about it. I want to help other people as they manage those decisions and try to get through, the next stage of this new reality, the new frontier, as Stormy Friday called it. So it's like let's all start looking at our own situation, our own roles and responsibilities, our own vulnerabilities and make decisions for ourselves and be more graceful, more empathetic, more understanding of those across the street or across the workplace from us, because some people are really itching to get back into the office and they need to get there because their home situation is not a comfortable one. It's been very challenging for them these last couple months, and they need to get back into the workplace. So I get that. So we got to give them the flexibility to do that if possible, if safe, and if an organization can manage a certain percentage of the workforce coming back in. And then those who don't want to leave their homes or feel more comfortable working from home, let them continue to do so. And then all these arguments about opening and the risk reward, I guess, is the best way to describe it. Of course, we have the two extremes, and I'll leave those to the side of stay closed forever versus open and don't wear a mask. I think those are both foolish perspectives, to be honest. That we have to find this nuanced balance of how do we live in this new frontier with the COVID-19 threat out there, stay safe as we can, do what we can to be respectful of others and our society, and play our role as responsible citizens to protect others and provide their safety. And then, based on our own calculations of what we're comfortable with, go and live our lives. Go begin to make the most of this and just get on living. I'll share one more thing later. But what do you think about that as far as a baseline to begin?
No, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of interesting points that you made. One, it's you and I will have an opinion of what we think the future look like, but that always has to fold into what the company's goals are and what their structure is. So it's a great point that you make, and we have to always remember that point, right? We are at the service of the organizations that we represent. It's a great point. And then the second element of, okay, so we open up the offices and people want to go back. How many people are going to go back to the office? So at Open Source Workplace last week, we did launch a question, and the question simply asked, when your office reopens, how many days do you want to return to work, or how many days do you want to work from home? And it was really interesting. The choice was 0 all the way through to 5 days per week, and
Okay.
2 to 3 was 14 and 18% respectively. 5 was 57%. Now, what we don't know is, the question doesn't ask how long would the responders want that to be. Was that in the short term? Was that in the long term? But in essence, it just gives you a real perspective of, how long and how many people want to work from home post this lockdown.
Yeah, more than half, it looks like,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah,
and I think that's going to align with the availability of space at this point. We've been doing a lot of work at iOffice with our clients, engaging them with our new feature called Space Right, which allows them to set parameters and then create the floor plan that allows for a certain distance, whether it's 6, 12 feet or more, and allow that comfort along with so many other protocols to put into place to allow people to feel comfortable. And most floor plan capacities drop, from, if 100%, was one thing, it drops to 30% or 25%. And then add on that the some regional governments are mandating a certain percentage of reopening only. So I think there's going to be a natural, migration or a settling in over these coming weeks and months into a comfort zone. I think we get into trouble if we look too far out or we start worrying too much about enforcing policies on people that don't agree with those policies. That's where I get a little concerned. But again, that's so far down the road, at least from what I'm hearing. Have you heard? I mean, most organizations are going to try to accommodate their employees and allow for that flexibility and comfort. And no one's going to force someone back if they don't want to go back. At least they would like to avoid that if they can. Some essential workers may have to make a hard decision. And many have been making hard decisions these last couple months already because they've continued to work even in this environment.
Yeah, and you just have to look at some of the news that come out, with Google, Facebook, and so on and so forth, right? They've made the decision they're not going to open their offices in many locations until at least the new year, which is a really interesting perspective to take, given the size of the campuses, the amount of employees that actually impacts. I thought that was a very interesting decision that they made. And I guess they probably, I don't know whether they internally polled, whether they internally evaluated what the sort of risks were or how that would be. I don't know how they came to that decision. But again,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I haven't heard any company or any of my peers or anyone I know in the industry say that my company is going to mandate. I don't think any state governor or prime minister or president in any other country is going to do the same thing. Boris Johnson yesterday, the UK prime minister, did say that we should be opening the UK for those people who cannot work from home and want to go back to work. So
Yeah.
construction workers, things like that, right? So it's how do we open it up so that they actually can go back to work because they have no way of working from home. So that's what they're looking to focus on as they put through their phased approach that he articulated yesterday. Very interesting approach in how the UK are actually planning to open up around each country within the UK, and they're going to do it in a phased approach. And if everyone accommodates and sort of meets certain milestones, then they will open up and move to next steps. I think there's a 5-step process he articulated. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of rolls out
Let's
across the
think
UK.
about the, look at your survey and map that against what Facebook and Google are doing. If they're saying we're closed till the end of the year, we're not opening our offices at all and not giving you the choice to come in, and there's a percentage, whether it's 20, 30, 40% of the people out there that want to get out of their homes and want to re-engage at some level, those voices aren't being heard. So part of you says, we're shutting down completely. We're playing this ultra careful approach of not reopening the offices, but you're accommodating maybe the majority, but you're not accommodating many. There's many that would have, an inability to do their work, at least in a comfortable way with their kids or their cramped spaces or small apartments, small city living where they're just needing a place to get out for their own well-being. So, there's no clear-cut answers. I think that's why I was hoping there'd be more flexibility in the sense of choice. We need to reopen the economy to get it rolling for those that need, like you say, that can't work from home. That's certainly for me, a base of balancing this whole pandemic journey, is that it's not just about saving lives from getting exposed and dying from the virus. There's this other piece that's becoming more and more prevalent and evident, is that there's people suffering and dying of other things because of the COVID-19 lockdown, and the economy needs to reopen to avoid some of those other things. Hospitals are going under. There are people not doing routine checkups. There are people not being screened for cancer. They're going to die from cancer instead of coronavirus. Was that a better decision? The fact that we had them locked down, they couldn't go get their cancer screenings or their blood pressure checks, so therefore they're going to die from heart disease and other things. I watched a movie last week. We talked about it offline. I don't think we talked about it on the stream, but the movie The Big Short, which was about the financial, global financial crisis of 2008. And it's an entertaining movie. I know it's done for some dramatic and comedic effect, certainly. But that story and a couple of the acting in that movie was great. And then a couple of the takeaways that were interesting is, one, we thought that was the end of the world, right? Financially, the global meltdown, the subprime mortgage market just totally imploded. And there was a concern that the economy and not just the U.S., but the global economy was going to go into a Great Depression. And it was called the Great Recession. We had this great, horrible time of several years, in fact, 10 years to recover from it. That was 5 million job losses, Steve. That if the stats were right that they presented, that was just 5 million job losses. And this coronavirus lockdown has resulted in over 20 million or 30 million job losses, depending on, I know what the latest statistics are. But there's a quote by Brad Pitt's character in that movie where, because they had all bet against the mortgages, knowing that they were going to collapse, and there was actually signs it was beginning to happen, and this global meltdown was going to happen financially. And a couple of the characters were kind of giddy that their bet of shorting the market was going to pay off. And Brad Pitt reminded them that, hey, don't celebrate. This is a terrible thing. If the global economy goes down and crashes, for every 1% increase in the unemployment rate, 40,000 people will die. And it was like stunning. So I actually started Googling and saying, where's that statistic from? And it's based on some studies from the 1980s where it was actually for every 1% increase in unemployment, 37,000 some odd people die from from heart disease and heart attacks and suicide and drug addiction and alcohol abuse, all these things that we're seeing now happening in this terrible situation for so many people. So we've gone from a 3.5 or so percent unemployment rate to almost 15% unemployment in these last 2 months. So I don't know. I'm not a math guy, Steve, but it's a lot of people. It's a lot of heartache. It's a lot of pain and suffering beyond what's going on with the direct impact of the virus. So I just hope we can find a nuanced, balanced approach. And whatever your position along that, spectrum and where you fall in different policy decisions and governmental decisions and political thought, just remind yourself that there's other perspectives and there's other people out there that have a different situation than our own. And we need to be empathetic to them and try to come up with a solution that allows for that. Each person in a free society has to make their own choices that benefit, yes, the society, but also is appropriate for themselves. And what's right for me and what's right for you may not be right for the other person watching this or the other person that we would never meet, who we can't even begin to imagine what they're going through. So that's my speech for a Monday morning.
No, it's you mentioned a lot of important points in that data point. One for every 1%, that's 40,000. Man, that's staggering. Whenever you consider we were at 5 and the percentage is 20 or and the reports I saw over the weekend is probably that's understated because there are so many people that can't file because of the amount of people trying to file. So that's just frightening whenever you consider that, and it's a tough thing to balance, right? Opening up and allowing those businesses to open, and then then comes down to us as individuals who are employed and do have the ability. Then what is our responsibility to those businesses to help keep everyone in check? So there's a lot of things to balance out. And on the back of that, just because you went there with the 2018 or 2008 financial crisis, that we saw Governor Cuomo yesterday, where he was talking about how in that crisis the big banks were bailed out, so taxpayers were taking advantage of with all those mortgage-backed securities, and then whenever it all went when they crashed, then there was the balloon payment was taxpayers bailing out these huge financial institutions. Where today you've got a lot more people unemployed, you've got all these huge industries who've received a lot of funding, and he's sort of questioning and asking that, well, how are we going to look after the Americans who have lost their jobs today? How are they going to be supported? How are they going to be helped? And he sort of articulated as a state governor, his funding comes from taxpayers, and the predominant way that money is spent is through schools, is through government departments, and through healthcare. And at this moment in time, the shortfall in the amount of tax revenue they've been able to collect this year with the additional burden or cost, I shouldn't say burden, but the cost of COVID-19, how are they going to cover that? And what he's proposing is called the America's First Law. So in other words, what he wants to propose is if these big businesses who've received funding through this time don't rehire to the levels that they did prior to COVID-19, then they should be made to pay back all that funding so that then it can be redistributed. It's an interesting point, interesting view. It's I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know how long he's sort of given these companies to sort of get back to those levels, because I don't think the airlines are going to get back to that level or could get back to that level in the short term, because I don't know how many people are going to travel. But it's like, so how do you bring all those factors together? But I think if you take the spirit of what he's saying, I think most people would sort of buy into that spirit.
Oh yeah, we all want fairness. We all want to see our tax dollars flying. That often doesn't happen in these crisis situations, and just in the big picture of how decisions are made and what the fallout is. I think we've made a lot of decisions, or our government has made a lot of decisions. And that's not what this show's about, but at the same time, it's a fascinating conversation to see that there are some big ripple effects and certainly long-term implications, financially, economically. And then, the health and well-being of people is going to be something we have to watch and be mindful of. So I think the bottom line on that is just, again, it's what I have to do, and hopefully it helps others, is to stay focused on what I can control. And this week, I've got an exciting week ahead. I've got a lot going on, a lot of work to do. I'm launching a second podcast called the Asset Champion Podcast this week. It's for my asset division of iOffice, and we're going to have to get those first few episodes out, and I had a lot of work to get that done, but I'm excited about it. For a while, we were putting it off, and I was putting it off and saying, well, nobody wants to hear a new show during this pandemic experience, and it would be a bad decision to launch it. Well, as we get into this new phase, and I think it is a new phase of new normal, new frontier, whatever you want to call it, there are people that are going to be interested in, as you say, bettering themselves and upskilling and finding the right content. The stuff that you've been putting out over these last couple months is amazing. Interviews with Andrew and Ken and Jonathan and so many others, Christina. I just watch those, and they're helping so many people. And I hope what I'm doing as I've tried to navigate my way as a content creator and someone who's trying to bring the community together, I hope I'm doing a good job with that and reaching people where they are. And again, it's not about hitting numbers or finding, some, new selfish goal, but just what can I control? What can I do well? What are my skills? And then what do I need to adapt to? And how do I need to adjust? And that's where we're going to be talking about those in the coming weeks and months. As my whole conference schedule has gone out the window, and there are opportunities to be part of other virtual events and things that I've kind of shut out of my mind. I'm just not interested in right now, but in a couple months from now, I certainly will be hoping to see those innovative companies coming up with ways to keep us together and keep the conversation going and find ways to connect, and looking forward to those. But I hope you are feeling good. I know you had a poorly weekend. Is that what it was? You were feeling poorly?
I had a rough weekend. Let's just leave it at that.
I love your accent, the way you say certain words, and a lot of times I'll go, "What did he say?" And then I hear the context and I figure it out. But yeah, I mean, we're going to have those melancholy days, those times where it's like, is it all really worth it? Am I helping anybody? And I think that the answer is yes. And even if it's one person, we got to remember, watching this video, if it's 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, we just keep doing it because it helps us. You and I are the people most benefiting from these. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And I appreciate you for carrying the torch for this video. And I've done all I can to try and contribute, but I really appreciate it. And as I sort of think about through the week, there are a few topics that I'd like to really tackle that sort of are interesting to me in sort of, I think it's interesting for the community at large. One is co-working. And I have a few things to share on my perspectives on that. And I think, if you think about that market segment, you think about that business model, but you think about what service they deliver to entrepreneurs, but also to their enterprise clients. How is that model going to change? Because what I'm seeing at the moment, there is no change to that model. And there are questions that I have in their product, in the service that they're trying to deliver to me. So I'd love to touch on some of that and a few other things this week. So it should be interesting. And I hope that I get myself replenished today. I get my energy back up, and I get my optimistic self back. So tomorrow we're flying high.
Well, I'll give you one last movie quote, as I did stumble upon during my vegging out in front of the TV time. It often happens. You ever seen the movie? I'm sure you have. I've seen it like 93 times, or at least parts of it like 93 times. Is The Shawshank Redemption?
Yes.
You've seen that movie, right?
Yeah,
it's always on cable. Whenever I'm flipping around and I see it, could be at the beginning, the middle, or the end. I'll just stop and I'll watch Morgan Freeman and what's the guy's name? The other actor who plays Andy Dufresne, who escapes from Shawshank. But there's a scene at the end or near the end where Andy Dufresne is talking to Morgan Freeman's character, and you can tell he's at his wit's end. He's had a hard time. I think he's been in the prison for 20 plus years. And at that point, you don't know that he's been planning all along to break out, and he's keeping Morgan Freeman out of that. But he said, when you're in that situation, and like we're kind of in a sense a prison of our own with this COVID-19 situation, this lockdown. The big line from Andy Dufresne is, it's time to get busy living or get busy dying. Yep. And it's not about being negative and saying, I'm going to give up. It's going to be, I'm going to get busy living no matter what my circumstance, whether I'm in this situation or I get back out and facing my fears and re-engaging with the public or going back into the office and workplace. I got to live. I got to live my life with COVID-19, this new phase, and let's get busy living, finding again safety and comfort and and respectfulness towards others, and doing the things that it takes to be a good citizen, but also doing what's best for you and your family. And different people have different expectations and different needs and different vulnerabilities. So let's be respectful of each one as we all make those choices to get busy living with COVID-19 and the rest of this journey we're on together. So I don't know if it's a stretch to pull that into this situation, but it hit me as I watched it.
I appreciate it. No, it is, and it all brings it back as well. It's a personal choice. We all have a choice, and it's up to us if we want to live and we want to prosper. So, Mike, thank you. I appreciate your time today. I thank you for pulling me through. And
You're welcome, Steve.
Tomorrow, man.
I'm here for you. See you then. See you tomorrow.
Cheers, man. Thanks.